Hare Om. Hare Om. Is the camera on? Can somebody tell me if it's all going on? I can't see my camera on me. Hopefully it's on. Hi, welcome to my 7th or 8th. This is my 8th live share. Started on the 12th on Easter, and I've just been going regularly and giving these live shares. I am Mathura Das. Welcome. It's a kind of honor and a privilege to be able to share with all of you, new friends, old friends, and people from all over the world, and people who are not going to be seeing this live. They're going to be seeing this later. And I'll most probably, at the end of all this, upload them onto YouTube, and then I'm going to do another level of it because I'm really enjoying doing this, and I've got lots and lots of things to share. At the moment, what I'm doing is I'm offering, or I'm sharing in these shares, because it's a very difficult time for everybody at the moment. Or some people it's not difficult, but it's a very unusual time that we're all going through collectively. And that's kind of brought this all about. It seems to be a way forward that's been instigated by this virus thing that we're all going through. Lots of things in technology come about due to crises or trends, and live sharing seems to be the big thing, a way of connecting. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to connect with friends around the world and share what one loves to do. And what I love to do is chant some sacred sounds. It's something that's had a big transformative effect on my life and millions of people around the world. And it's central behind the story that I'm going to tell after I've done some chants and some songs. A story that I've been it's a long story. It's an epic story. It's a historical story involving what's in a name. How did somebody like me from southwest London get the name Mathura Das? Who wasn't born with that name. It's a Hindu, it's an Indian name. So it's tracing that phenomena about how all of that is possible, how that has come about, with involving history of the British Empire, Calcutta, figures who have been instrumental in bringing this lineage from a certain part of India to the West. Specifically, the person who's coming to do this and spread this magic is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who arrived in America in 65. My story involves two historical processes which I call ripples. One comes from India from about 5,000 years ago, from a great rishi called Vyasadeva, a great sage, and that went down through historical processes, through time, and through these characters in Bengal to Bhaktivedanta Swami, and arriving in America in 65. And the other ripple effect that I've been talking a lot about in my last two shares is the psychedelic ripple effect, because it was these two ripples that were going to converge in my life and have great influence, and not just me, but on a whole segment of the baby boom generation that had got involved with Eastern spirituality, specifically Indian. And all sorts of other alternative forms of spirituality. In fact, that period was a kind of the start of many, many, many things. I'll get into that into my talk. First of all, I'm going to do 3 Oms, and then I'm going to do some prayers to my gurus and my lineage, and then I will do some songs, chants. Please join with me. The cosmic Omkara.
Om Agyanatimirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantiham Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajevam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Badan Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakam Vidanscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Shri Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindabanishwari Rishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paskacha Deshatarine Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hari Om Hari Om. We all need blessings. Doesn't matter who we are. As Bob Dylan says in that fantastic song, you got to serve somebody. That's the nature of the tradition that I've been connected to. It's all about service, and that's what the name Das means. So anybody who's got the name Das, it means that they're the tradition that they're connected to is the Bhakti tradition, and the service should be at the center of their main
theological and the way that they are, their outlook on the way that they live their lives in somehow or other, whatever form. It's at the essence of the whole spiritual tradition, service. It's that you're not the center of everything. The supreme, we are part of a great whole, created by the supreme divine Bhagavan, full in 6 opulences: knowledge, beauty, strength, wealth, renunciation, and beauty, I think. Yeah, yes, and knowledge. Anyway, I'm going to sing some songs now, because that's one of the best things that we can do, some chants, some sacred chants, some spiritual sound vibrations. It's great for myself and it's lovely for sharing. I'm going to sing this composition, Sri Krishna Hari, Sri Krishna Govinda, Hari Murari, He Nath Narayana Vasudeva. And then I'm going to go into trying to slightly change the melody and go into one of the most powerful Vaishnava mantras, the main mantra of the Sri Sampradaya of South India, Om Namo Narayanaya, and variations of and Hari Om. So, and it's all in call and response. I hope this is all coming through and people are there. Anyway, here we go. Sri Krishna Govinda Hari Murari. And there, of course, in an ideal world, there'd be a tabla or a mridanga going da din din da 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 da din din da. Shri Krishna Govinda Hari Murari, Shri Krishna Govinda Hari Murari, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva. Sorry. Shri Krishna Govinda Hari Murari, Shri Krishna Govinda Hari Murari, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva, Shri Krishna Govinda Hari Murari, Shri Krishna Govinda Hari Murari, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva, Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva, Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murari. Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva, Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva, Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, He Nata Narayana Vasudeva. Hari Om, 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 Om Shanti, 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 Hare. I really hope this is getting out there and someone's watching, because I haven't seen any responses yet. If someone's hearing, just send a little message, say hi, so I know that you're there. I have to get this message off my thing. I think I'm going to turn that off. And yes, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. Welcome, whoever's there watching this. That was a little bit of chanting. I'm going to do another song now, not a chant. This is a song that I have done before on one of the other live shares. This is called Dark Night of the Soul, and for many people it's about facing major challenges in life that can be incredibly disorientating, in the sense that one can lose one's complete bearings, feel extreme alienation from yourself, from society, be wrapped up in an existential anxiety that's overwhelming to the point where it's almost impossible to function on a normal everyday basis. And I should know, because I've had a couple of these, and wouldn't wish them on anybody really, but they are rather transformative and have been given these types of experience. There's no stereotypes, a crisis. But Stanislav Grof and his wife, Christina, have written a very interesting book called The Stormy Search for the Self. And it deals with the many obstacles and psychological things that people that come up in crises. And one of the words, apart from Dark Night of the Soul, existential crisis, is spiritual emergency. And it's about it being actually very cleansing process, kind of akin a bit to the psychedelic process, which involves a kind of stripping of the ego. But this doesn't involve any psychedelics. It just happens one way or another, and it can happen by a loss of a dear friend, a financial, economic crisis in one's life, a loss of a relative, a major shift in perspective, and or it can just kind of be completely out of one's control. Like I mentioned before, Tolstoy, the great writer, he went through a big transformation in his life, and it felt as if the kind of rug had been pulled from underneath him. And he woke up one morning and there was just no meaning in life anymore. And they all have their peculiarities. Anyway, me and Prana, who I wrote the song with for the Bindu Babas, it's a mixture of some of his experiences of when he was living in London and really going through challenges, going through, living in squats and, not having any money, going through bins. And the other stuff is just about the quandary of existence. And our story song has a kind of happy, in a sense, resolution to it, a purification. And so please, I share this with you, the dark night of the soul. And I do these funny noises with my mouth because I don't have a horn player and or instrumentalist. When everything you say gets twisted on the way, taken contrary, and everything you've done that seemed a lot of fun is so far away. When you haven't got a lot, you're living in a squat, skimming through the bins, paying for your sins, trying to find a way. And the world passes you by every time you blink your eye. There goes another day. When you don't know what to do, you haven't got a clue what it's all about. The people in your space are so much in your face that you want to shout. You make a cup of tea and you got a minute free. Flick on the TV and everything you see is full of misery. And all the stuff you hear just covers you with fear and insecurity. When your life is full of doubt, you can't see a way out for your sanity. In the struggle and the fight, you watch the world lose sight of its... Okay, I've done that one, sorry. Sorry. Your life is full of doubt, you can't see a way out for your sanity. Sorry. When your life is full of doubt, you can't see a way out for your sanity. In the struggle and the fight, you watch the world lose sight of its humanity. And you're wondering why you were born at all, and if God's hiding there behind the wall we call reality. And if he's really there, why the hell am I here in this insanity? On the way to your goal, you'll pass the dark night of the soul, where you'll feel just like a bastard of creation, hanging over the abyss, while the snakes of hell all hiss, snapping as you pray in desperation. That's when you find you've got a friend on whom you can depend, who mysteriously appears as if from nowhere. Though his form you may not see, his presence sets you free, and he shows you the way home and how to go there. As daytime follows night, shadows with the light start to disappear. The future's looking bright, it's gonna be alright, everything is clear. Now the road lights up as you dance along. You got a sense of purpose and you're feeling strong, full of energy. And then you realize it was angels in disguise come to set you free. 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 And then you realize it was angels in disguise come to set you free. As daytime follows night, the shadows with the light start to disappear. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and all things must pass one way or another. Thank you. Hi, Penny. Just have a sip. So there we go. Always, it's nice to share a song. These songs that I wrote with Pranaji, when I started writing them in my late 40s, Prana's been writing songs for years, and it's been wonderful, our journey with them all. And I haven't written that many. I've written some of my chant compositions, and I'm going to start my story now and kind of explain a little bit where the guitar came in. And so I'm going to continue on from yesterday. With a little bit of background I gave at the beginning about the historical processes, but at the moment in my story, we've actually come up to some kind of like, my story has started to be described and kind of like grow and beginning to kind of merge with it's merged with the psychedelic ripple. I've just hit it. Basically, yesterday, I explained about my first LSD trip when I'm only 14 and a half with my friend Gordon. And it was mind-boggling, to say the least. And also, it got us semi into trouble. Me, I kind of got out of it, but Gordon got caught out by his mother on the first trip. And so she knew that he had dropped LSD. And obviously, our parents were beginning to get a bit concerned about us. We were quite young. His family's called Young, and we were at this grammar school, and there was all this kind of pressure on you at that age to kind of like succeed. Your parents have gone all this way to bring you up and protect you and get you to this stage, and they want you to have a good education. They're thinking about the best of you. And in that district, Hampton was one of the best schools, very sought after, and we were there, so fortunate to be at this school, and we just hated it. Absolutely hated this school. My brother had been there for, it started 4 years before me, and he was also Hampton was very good for rowing because it was near the Thames. Many of the Hampton rowing team went on to Oxford and became part of the Oxford rowing team, the famous Oxford and Cambridge rowing team. And my brother, even at one point, all of his gang were connected with the rowing club of Hampton that had its kind of base on the locks in Molesey. And his gang were all part of that. And my brother even rowed as a youth for England in one competition. So we had this sports thing that I was explaining about, our saving grace, really, because also, apart from my brother being good at sports, he was one of only 2 members in the whole of Hampton Grammar that belonged to the National Students' Union, which obviously kind of like They thought, leftist tendencies, possibly kind of commie. They mostly were thinking like that. Connections, going up to protest with Tariq Ali and all the kind of leftists up in town. But my brother was not like that at all. You sometimes heard little discussions about Mao's Little Red Book, but it didn't get much more serious than that. But it kind of marked me a little bit when I joined, because I had the family name Oleska. And it was like, okay, Oleska, the son of yes. But I was good at sports, so it kept me off my back. But then I started to get more and more disinterested. Not that I was very interested from the beginning, but really it became a real burden to be at this school. And it was like, what do they want us to become? There were a couple of things in the media that had a kind of two films that were going to have a kind of effect on me. One was a Man Called Horse with Richard Harris, which is a fantastic film, and it's about him, a white man, and getting involved with Native Americans in the kind of Victorian type period, and going into the world of the savage, and beautifully shot. And they're all on horses, and there's this amazing initiation ceremony. Anyway, I saw that at the Twickenham Odeon. It's a very boring kind of part of suburb, not like Richmond. And anyway, we went to see A Man Called Horse, and it was a very powerful movie, and you were there, and it was just like, wow, that whole simple living. And you came out into the high street of Twickenham with the Wimpy Bar across the road, and you looked at it all and you went, what, where did it all go wrong? Why did we create all this? I was beginning to ask all these questions. And then at school, you were expected to get all these kind of knuckle down, pass these exams and subjects that had no real kind of meaning to you, at least not to me. And to get exam results to go into further education, if possible, if that was your inclination. The school next door, Rectory, that was more kind of vocationally orientated. Okay, it was categorized. We had O levels and A levels. They had GCEs. It was a kind of whole different categorization system in England. A couple of my friends went to that school, in the slightly older Chris Cox and Sue Barnes. And so I got to hear about what that school was like. And then we had ours. And then there was another school in Twickenham called Thames Valley. And when we left primary school, half my friends went off to Thames Valley, and some of my friends came to Hampton Grammar. But I made these new friends. My new friends were really Chris Jackson and Gordon Young and Patrick McGrath, who unfortunately passed away a little bit ago. And we reconnected after years and years ago. But I kept lots of us, after this journey that we were going to go through together, we kind of departed ways in our teens, but that's coming in the story. So at this time, and this is what was happening at that time, was I was explaining, people were coming together. We were just these little kids at school, but there was kind of this place where I scored my first hash l'auberge. There was also a place in Kingston called the Three Fishes, and loads of young people, and you could go there and get hash, and it was all going on. And there were certain groups and places you could go to see music. Even the Strawberry Hill, the college there, they had a venue place, and I saw kind of lesser known groups at that time, Magna Carta and East of Eden when they did Jig a Jig, and there was also Kingston Polytechnic where lots of bands came. That's coming slightly a little bit later in the story, and it's coming in about a year. But there was these venues, and there was this incredible place in Twickenham right nearby that had a kind of bit of a history connected with the late beats going into the hippies, called Eal Pie Island. It's a little island in the River Thames, and there was this old kind of like hotel thing on it, and it had been a venue for groups and stuff. I remember being at the Twickenham Odeon and seeing a little film about what was going on, and the Pretty Things had played there. I think most of the groups most probably played there, the Stones and everybody, the Yardbirds. It was a kind of rite of passage place. And then it turned into a commune. And in the summer of 69, just before I had my first joint, I went there, and on the solstice, and there was Pete Green from Fleetwood Mac. He was playing guitar, and there was just a couple of hundred people all sitting around outside on this gorgeous summer day. And I hadn't quite had my joint yet. I was about to have that shortly. Anyway, so just to give you an idea of what was going on, bigger scenes, but basically for me at that time, it was me and my mates in my bedroom because Chris Jackson lived in Kew, not far from Kew Gardens, right by the railway tracks near the station. You definitely couldn't go around to Gordon's house and smoke a dope or cigarettes in his house, in his bedroom or anything. So it all happened up in my bedroom with my psychedelic posters on the wall, my sound system. I had a mattress on the floor. One Christmas, me and Nick both bought each other as Christmas presents. We just went to Pier 1 Imports in Kingston, where you get all these things. And we bought each other these nice hand-printed Indian cloths that we put on, they're called madrasses, put them on the floor. So I had my little kind of little hippie pad in my bedroom, really, where it was a safe place because my parents didn't intervene. They never stuck their nose. They never came up and said, "What are you doing in there? You shouldn't be doing this," or something. Maybe on certain days, my father would be trying to check out I'd done my homework and things like that. Even he built a kind of nice thing in my bedroom, kind of with the idea that it was like a study place that I'd be seriously kind of doing my homework, but I couldn't stand homework. And I also have slightly dyslexic with mathematics, and that was a cause for concern. I just never really kind of got it when it even went from up to algebra. I always just didn't get it at that time. And also the sports thing. I was, so still quite into sports, my football. And I was into Fulham football team, and I belonged to another football team apart from being Richmond Borough, Hampton team. It was another East Twickenham team, and then there was another team. And through this, that was run by Mr. Kennedy. I can't remember the name of it. It was a kind of a football thing, and it was a way of bringing us together as young kids. And we had so much energy, starting with the boy cubs and then going into the football. And through this football team, there were two older people involved with the football that I got. And one of them specifically had a big influence on me, and he was 2 years older than me and 2 years younger than my brother. And he was at the same school, Hampton School, but he was so kind of bright that he was in the same year as my brother. He was advanced. Even though he was young, he was like a genius, really. And we never hung out at school. I saw him around. I didn't know who he was. He was kind of different. He was a kind of a very different type of person, and not the same as my brother's gang either. But we got friendly at the football thing, and then he had a lovely girlfriend that everybody fancied, called Sue Barnes, and she was a bit younger, about the same age as him, and she went to Rectory, and she lived just behind, and she had a horse, and she was lovely, and Mick Pitt befriended me and Sue Barnes, and he was this quite strong influence on on our group, especially me, because he lived by it. I don't know what it was that I was much younger, but I was really, really, because I had all this influence from my brother. We had this atmosphere at the house. It was semi, I wouldn't call it bohemian. It was liberal. My brother with his bedroom and his gang and me, and it was a place where you could go and relax. And so I got friendly with Mick, and now Mick was 2 years older than me, and he was way ahead of the game than me, and maybe more adventurous even than my brother. He had all these clubs and places I've been mentioning, the Roundhouse and UFO. Yeah, he used to go out there and he knew all the characters involved with them, and he knew all these poets and people that I only just heard the names of, Ginsberg and the Beat Poets. He was very literate, and we started to hang out. And I got very, very influenced by him. And in our neighbourhood, southwest England, London, sorry, we had just in the Hampton area, Hampton Hill, Teddington, I call them the kind of three different levels of liberalness. And for many people around the world, they were not exposed to, as children, to this kind of liberality amongst elders. They had very different upbringings. But in my house, I would say it was quite strong liberal, but you did it out of sight in a bedroom, and you didn't flaunt your marijuana smoking in front of your parents. But through Mick, who was older, I got to know this other chap belonging to a very family, and their family were close with my mum because they were liberals. And They live right near the St James's Church in Hampton, at the Hampton Hill, and they had a big old Victorian house, and there was 4 of them, 2 sisters and 1 elder, and one, yeah, they were quite a big family, and there was the parents, and they had a big um, dining room area where basically I came round with Mick Pitt. I was kind of introduced. There was many more people than my gang, and they were all kind of a couple of years older, and they were sussing me out, but they were all very friendly, and it was the same story. This is what young hippie, to be kind of hippie types would do. They would hang out with their mates. And if you had lucky to have a liberal families, you would hang around there and you would smoke pot and listen to music and talk and hang out. And that's basically what we did there. They were the first marijuana I ever saw was what Mark had grown in his garden. They'd grown some in the garden with their permission of their parents, and even some they planted in the churchyard just behind. And anyway, there's some funny. Okay, I'll tell the anecdote. Maybe on the third time I went round there after they got used to me, we brought round Gordon to the house, and it was all kind of wow. He'd been to my house, but this was another step up in bohemianness, and it was just happened to be the day when Mark had just cultivated the marijuana from the garden and had it on this big old kind of table in this area. We're all sitting around. It was a whole. Gordon just walked into the scene, and he had it all on the table, and all these different things were all around the table. And then all of a sudden, I think he was cutting it and starting to do things with it and trimming it and all these things. And his mother kind of walked in her big sweater, loose sweater, very liberal. She looked quite concerned, and she came in, and everyone froze. And basically, she said, "Mark," because his name was Mark, and she said, "Use a chopping board," and walked out again. And that was it. And everybody just burst into laughter. And my friend Gordon almost had a heart attack, and he just was one of these, wow, how could the elders could be so cool. It was very funny. Anyway, that was part of that scene. I got to hear different kinds of music through the brothers of my friends. I got to hear Love, my friend Chris Cox's, and another friend connected with the circle. He was really into the West Coast stuff that never got me, if I'm quite honest. Big Brother and the Holding Company, Janis Joplin, even the Grateful Dead. I love the covers, I like the concepts, but the music just wasn't doing it for me as much as what I was listening to from my brother and what I was going to hear there. My brother, through his friends and his scene, though, he was very much into the blues, like a lot of people at that time. And I got really into all the classic blues, Chicago blues and stuff with Little Walter, Muddy Waters, Howling Wolf. And my brother had all those Marble Arch albums, and I would just kind of borrow them and listen to them all the time. And I'd also just started to play guitar. Later on, it became John Mayall with my brother, and then Cream. Got very much into Cream. I was just listening yesterday and just realizing Sunshine of Your Love and all those. I hadn't listened to them for ages, and I suddenly realized how much well I knew them, because I must have listened to them so many times, those albums, and looked at the covers and the whole psychedelic thing. And the Cream were very big, and my brother was into acoustic guitar music. There was this group called Pentangle, and the musicians Burt Yanks and John Renbourn, and the double bass player Danny Thompson. That was very big. And he had another 2 albums called the Contemporary Guitar Sampler. I love guitar, and right from where I'm from was one of the best classical guitarists came, Julian Bream, and I'd seen him on television, and I just loved the classical guitar. I liked the sound of acoustic music as well, and my brother got hold of a guitar, and as soon as he got hold of it, I was kind of borrowing it, and I learned House of the Rising Sun. When he wasn't using his guitar, I just was sitting there with this guitar going over and over and over and over and over and over again till I got the strumming and I got the guitar thing. And that was the beginning of my journey with guitar playing. And we also got hold of the Beatles songbook. that was illustrated, and it was, and so I started to kind of get a bit obsessed, and I eventually got my own. We even got a cheap electric guitar. There was a little shop in Hampton Hill High Street where you could get guitars and stuff, cheapy things. Eventually, around I think my 15th birthday, my father bought me a lovely present for my birthday, and he got it through Exchange and Mart. And excuse me, just put the electricity on. Sorry. Hi everybody. Hi Gwyn. It was a Hofner, a classical guitar, and it was lovely. I fell in love with this. It's always good to get an instrument that you can fall in love with, and because you want to play it, it becomes very much connected to you. And I went off on a kind of a journey with it. And the great thing about my little gang was that Chris Jackson was very talented, more talented than I was. On every level of an artist, his little drawings and everything were incredibly fine. He was an extremely talented person, and maybe even more rebellious than me. And he was in one of these unusual situations that was rare at that time, where his parents were separated. I don't think they'd even been divorced, but that was very unusual in 1970s, early 1970s. So he was living with his mother. He didn't have a parental figure in his family, and we all influenced each other very much. And our house opposite the school became quite a big center of influence, really. So, and I used to listen to the blues albums and try to play along. And I used to tune my guitar, and that's how I figured out this scale that to this day I love, and it's part of my methodology of teaching. I call it the main pentatonic blues scale, and it's the basis of all the kind of the patterns. It's something I've discovered on the guitar. So that's part of something I was going through at that time. And so the music was evolving. That was, I have to say, the big turning point was Jimi Hendrix, seeing him on Ready Steady Go doing Hey Joe. He instantly, I think he actually took over from the Beatles and the Stones and everybody, and Jimmy just became my kind of god at that time. I was just seeing a dear friend of ours who's a Grammy Award winning producer, John Leckie, doing some stuff on the internet, and he was just mentioning how, I mean, there was nobody hipper than Jimi Hendrix at that time. He was the hippest, coolest guy. And especially when he came to London and he got all the gear from Carnaby Street, he just had this sense about how to look incredibly cool. And he was dark, he was black. That made him cool because all these blues musicians were cool. And he just looked brilliant. And that Axis Boulder's Love album that we had in the house and Are You Experienced, I just listened to them all the time. And what was incredibly one of the saddest days of my life was coming home. So go 1970, Jimi Hendrix had headlined the 1970s Isle of Wight concert, and he had just become a mega superstar. And he also did that very famous thing at the end of Woodstock, where there was hardly anybody there, but very revolutionary, the Star Spangled Banner. He'd gone through so many transformations in his short musical, meteoric musical career. Then I came home from school one afternoon, and my mother was back, and she had quite a really, it wasn't the same face she had when, she was going to, question me about LSD. It was kind of a very empathetic look. And she said, I've got something really sad to tell you. And I said, I couldn't imagine what it was going to be. And she says, Jimi Hendrix has died. And I just went, oh no. I just couldn't accept it. It was not possible. How could Jimi Hendrix, my God, the God, how could he, why him, of all people, And for some crazy thing, I went up to my brother's room, and he had this kind of, tailor's dummy with a gown on it and a mortarboard. And I got Axis Boulder's Love, the album, and I kind of just put it there and made some kind of weird, slightly macabre shrine, because I didn't know what to do. I've never felt that about anybody before, really. And it was a shock, big shock. And there were many more, obviously, that were going. Brian Jones had gone, and now, and then, Janis Joplin. But I wasn't as attached let's put it to Jimi Hendrix. So he was a big part of this. And so what was happening around this time, where we're all kind of growing and getting disenchanted more and more with school and everything, were these little parties that were going on, going to people's houses like Mark Withers, hearing of the music that they were playing. They were into stuff like Traffic, Pink Floyd, um, Argent, um, and other groups that I hadn't really heard, because I didn't have tons of money to go and buy tons of albums. I was hearing what Nick had, and then Mick, after introducing me to this scene, um, he, he had these two lady friends who were really far out, and one of them, Mary, her mother, she lived with her mother, um, right near the in Teddington, on a road, Clissold Road, that connects with the National Laboratory, a physical laboratory that's connected to Bushy Park. And he took me down there. She was the house was fantastic. This was the third stage of liberality. There was my house, then the Withers house, where you could smoke. The parents could come in, people, all teenagers smoking pot, no problem. And then you went to Mary's house, and her mother was an artist, and her father had died. And she was a potter, and she did paintings, and again with the Woolly Sweater Brigade, and it was and Mary looked like something out of pre-Raphaelite Rossetti painting, with this long, incredible hair, and she was very tall, even her features and everything, and she wore these long clothes, and she was just, it was like something out of some kind of Virginia Woolf meets the pre-Raphaelites. It was fantastic. And her friend was Lucy Burgess, extremely eccentric, and she had this strange fashion sense, very unique at that time. She used to buy weird stuff from Portobello Road, kind of, I can't really describe it. Had bright lipstick on and far out. They were credible, and they just took to me, and I took to them. Mick wasn't sure how we would all get on, but we all became it became another place to go, and it was really different. And you could go in the kitchen of the house while I make a cup of tea with Mary's mother, and actually with the joint, and sit there in front of her, and it was absolutely fine. And a defining thing in the story was that Mary's elder brother John had already dropped out and lived in a communal atmosphere in Wales, and that was like, wow, somebody who'd actually done the hippie thing. It was all becoming. I'd read Play Power by Richard Neville. I knew that people were doing far out things. They were dropping out, because that was my thing. It's like, where am I going with all this school and education? I don't want to go where they want me to go. I want to go somewhere else with my life. And it was, he came, and he'd actually been instrumental in building the pyramid stage for the 1971 Glastonbury Festival. There'd been one in 1970, very small. 1971 was the famous one with the pyramid. And that's a big story in itself, because it's a kind of turning point in the whole counterculture in England. And the spiritual kind of trip with Glastonbury. And so I'd heard about him. He was like almost a mythological character. And then one day he was going to come. And when he came to the house, they hadn't seen him for a while. He'd been doing his thing in Wales and everything. He was fantastic. He'd been at Cambridge. He'd dropped out. He was very articulate. They all bonded together. And while they were doing that, he'd had this book in his hand, and he put it down. And I looked at it, and it was called The Alternative. And I went, The Alternative. The Alternative. It was like it was just like a little door, an escape hatch into where I wanted to go, an alternative, isn't it? Okay, there were other books, Alternative London, but I hadn't quite read that. This is alternative. And either on the front cover or inside, there was a kind of a picture of this naked hippie lying in a field playing a flute. And in the background, you could see a geodesic dome and people riding kind of naked. I've got some of the pictures obviously mixed up together, but that's what I remember. Naked hippie, geodesic domes, people riding on bareback on horses. I'd just seen A Man Called Horse, and I thought, yes, that's kind of why I want to go somewhere like that with those types of people. Let's get out of this rat race, this horrible thing. And also talking to John, he was the first person, I just sat down. I was just eager to hear, just talk with him about dropping out. He was saying, dropping out isn't easy, and and he explained the compromises that they were doing, and it was a slightly kind of okay, they were kind of semi dropping out because nobody was kind of quite prepared to really drop out, if that what meant it at that time. England wasn't quite the same as America, didn't have, or Australia didn't have the big open spaces, and the climate wasn't that brilliant in places like Wales, but people were attempting to do it. And he was the one that kind of gave me, background a little bit about, the New World Order a little bit. It was a little about the dark energy on the planet, and how they got the whole world screwed up, and what was. I think I'd ask him, why did you drop out? And he just explained to it. He didn't want to get involved in that world and what it was all about. And I just think, yeah, that he explained it very succinctly, and I said that's exactly what I want to go, or that's where I'm going. I was trying to articulate, and part of this process was, at this time, my parents were getting rather concerned with me because my reports at school were getting terrible. I'd even lost disinterest in football. Our Richmond Borough football team, we played an inner city London football team, and Richmond is a kind of suburb for middle class people, and inner London is hard nosed kind of working class people and things like that. And we got thrashed 13-0. And I'd never seen such a tough and capable football players. Even our best players, they were out. We were nowhere. And I suddenly thought, because I thought maybe sports, maybe early on, didn't know what to do. And then I suddenly realised, that's never going to go. I was a bit competitive. I think I always liked winning. And that was my kind of motivation for it. And I liked being healthy, and I had all this energy. But suddenly, I can't really remember playing football after that or being interested. I just got more and more interested in kind of hanging out with my friends, listening to music, and doing these things. And my parents got concerned, and they asked my cousin, called Stuart, who was a big hero to me and my brother, and he was a very intelligent person and had been at Cambridge University, worked with drama, worked with mentally handicapped people, and extremely. He met Mervyn Peake, who wrote Gorm and Ghast. He was a kind of beatnik, you could say, but not just kind of a soft beat of that generation, and they were concerned because they couldn't figure me out, and my parents had no idea about certain things. So they asked Stuart, I think he was either in the area, to come to have a talk with me, a coming of age kind of talk. And so we sat down, and basically in a simple way, he just asked me what I thought about life, really. And I think that was the first person who'd ever asked me. No one had ever asked me what I thought, and I'd never actually had to give an answer. And I remember kind of taking a breath and then spontaneously saying something along the lines of, I don't think that life is all about a kind of a series of career opportunities. It's about acquiring knowledge and developing awareness. It's a whole process of knowing things. What's the point of having all these things if we don't know why we're here? And he listened to me, and he just kind of said, that's very interesting, Mark. And I said, yeah. And he said, what I think, just from hearing what you said, is that you're maybe on a spiritual path. And I went, really? What would you? I said I didn't really know what the word spiritual was. It wasn't a word we used in our house. Near Wimble Road, there was a little street with this little church thing where people went. I never even knew what went in there, but it was called the Spiritist Church, and I knew that there were people that kind of were tuning into kind of departed ancestors, and that's what I kind of understood of spirits. I didn't know about spiritual. Didn't even know at this age, and so I said, well, what does that mean then? And he defined the kind of loosely termed, and it was very interesting the way he tried to explain it to me, that spiritual means that you're not really interested in things and objects and the acquiring of them and that. You're more interested in the world of ideas and creativity and things to do with the mind and philosophy and arts. And I went, right, okay, spiritual. It was a word that suddenly entered into me at that time. But it didn't have a big effect on me, but it was like, yeah, okay, spiritual. That was a turning point. Now, at that time, there was these concerts, I've explained, going on in Hyde Park, and I went to a couple of them. I went to the King Crimson one, and I went to Eric Burdon and War with up there in Hyde Park. I saw those ones, and people were coming together, or volumes and volumes. I mean, really, they had just after the Stones in the Park in America had Woodstock, and then literally a few days later, there was the Isle of Wight festival that I talked about with, Bob Dylan. There's just like 500,000 young people coming. It's like massive, the whole thing that's going on. People really wanted to, get it together. At this time, also, Amsterdam was developing more and more as a kind of alternative hippie place. And this whole kind of journey off to India, that was a big part of the whole hippie experience, was you had to go over the channel from England to start this journey, but in those days you could actually go either by a series of buses, or you could just jump on this bus called the Magic Bus, that somebody that me and Prana met later was very much involved with, John Harper. And they had a magic bus in Amsterdam, and then they had these magic buses. They started off going to Istanbul, and then they started going further overland through Iran, and then they would go to Kabul, and then further on into India, and ultimately they would go to Kathmandu. That's where it all ended. And there was this famous place in Kathmandu called the Eden Hashish Center that was very, very big. It was a kind of like an El Dorado for hippies. You got to see these posters. There were lots of hippie places at that time. There were calendars that kind of made their way back. When my brother eventually left home and moved up to Stoke Newington, he became part of this phenomenon that was happening at that time, squats. So in many of these squats, which were houses which were kind of just lying there, not being developed, lots of young students and people just said, well, we're just going to move in. And so they moved in, got the electricity turned on, the gas, and they all moved in. And this was massive phenomena going all over Europe, especially in England, London, and in Holland, where they call them cracked houses. And my brother, they're quite famous, the ones where my brother lived was in Clissold Road in Stoke Newington. It was like a very different world from southwest London. Plus, Nick had finished his main college and was now at Ealing College. And so he was going through this. Used to go and visit him, and this is coming up in the next part of the story. I'm jumping ahead, but anyway, the squats were there. That was part of the scene that was happening. Now, I'd taken a few LSD trips at these parties and things like that, and I hadn't had anything profound. And then some of the trips were better than others, and then what happened was, in the fourth year at school, I started going down and down and down and down. And then it came to, I got caught by my form teacher for skiving off from school and suspended for 3 days. That was really, really bad. That was a kind of real embarrassment. I never thought I would, it was a big embarrassment, actually, social embarrassment, really, for my kind of, even though they were liberal parents, it was, I was becoming a strain, a cause for concern for them, basically, because I hadn't even taken my O levels, and you had to get to the fifth year and then take O levels in the fifth year, and this was the fourth year. And then one day, Mr. Alexander, who was the headmaster, sent somebody to call me to go to his office, the headmaster of Hampton School. And he was very stern looking, and I'd never really had a private encounter with him before. And he just laid this trip on me, and he said, look, we know that he actually said he knew about my friendship with Mick Pitt, and that was kind of praised because Mick Pitt, whatever they knew he did and what he was into, he was a great academic and had great results. And whatever he did with getting high and everything, it didn't affect his A levels and everything what he was involved with at that time. He must be one of the top students in the school. So he started off like that, and that was good. And then he just went on, you have smoking pot and having influence on other pupils, your studying is terrible, and your hair is too long. And he says, if you can't get your hair cut, improve your studies and stop smoking pot, don't come to school tomorrow. And I just kind of let out all this stuff that had been I'd never said before. I said, well, actually, my brother, since leaving school, and I taught him and his friends, they think that actually this school has got nothing to do with reality and what we learn here, and I don't have any benefit from staying here and what you all represent, and I like to grow my hair long and I want to do my thing. And then he said, well, I've had enough of this, and if you don't want to do this, don't come tomorrow. And I just kind of stood up and walked out the room. God, and I was quite amazed that I did that. And then I immediately went home and told my mother, who got back from work, and I think it was the first time I'd ever actually seen her cry. She cried a little bit, and there was nothing I could do to stop myself. This is me, this was my destiny. I just said, I can't go back. That's it, basically. And so that was a big thing for my parents and for me, but I didn't really give a toss about it. I just thought, because Mary, my friend, she'd left school and she got into a college to do O level. So I knew that there was this possibility. You didn't have to stay at school. You could go to some kind of colleges to do this. And I thought, that's it. At least I can do that, but get out of this school. Oh my goodness. And I started doing a couple of jobs and ended up in, this was like May, 71, 72, sorry, May 72. And I got a job at Hampton Court. They had a cafeteria there, and I was going to get, I got some money, and the summer solstice was coming. And Mary and Lucy, who had been at the 71 Glastonbury Festival, and Mark Withers' sister had gone, and she got kicked out of Twickenham County High School for going to Glastonbury Festival. They'd gone. We had this plan to all go to Glastonbury because we didn't know if there was going to be a festival, but it had become a thing, a solstice thing. Go to Glastonbury. Had the first two festivals. Let's just go there and do it, And so I got some money, and it was at this time that I met a guy working at the restaurant where I got some orange sunshine LSD, and I had it with some friends of mine, and it was absolutely incredible. But I think this is going to happen after I've just come back from Glastonbury, the actual taking of them, but I procured them from him. Maybe not at that time. Maybe actually I got to them afterwards. But anyway, that's a detail. The next thing I knew was just coming up the day before the solstice, so it would have been 20th of June, I set off hitchhiking. Can you imagine a young guy and two girls trying to hitchhike, three of us together? But somehow, through a few things, we found ourselves walking on the outskirts of Glastonbury into Glastonbury in the afternoon of that day. And we, on the way when we were walking, I met these guys from Leeds who were there, and I was a bit kind of Mary and Lucy were beginning to get on my nerves. They were just kind of bitching all the time, and I wanted a bit of kind of male banter, and these two hippies were there that they said, when they told us that they were from Leeds, they kind of made a side remark like Leadites. They had some kind of nickname, very, very snobby, looked down on a type of hippie that had these kind of green hats on, and they had a kind of, anyway, it was one of those silly little things that they had. Anyway, these guys were really friendly, and they looked at me, and he looked me up and down. We're walking, he says, what's your age? And I told them, they went, hey, you're the youngest hippie I've ever met. And you've got all the gear, haven't you? And I had red boots. I had tie-dye jeans that had been cut at the side with little things with flares and floral patches on my jeans. I had the look. I had the whole hippie thing. I was just younger than everybody. And he showed me Politics of Ecstasy by Timothy Leary. He said, have you seen this? This is the hippie Bible, Politics of Ecstasy, Timothy Leary. And I'd heard the name Timothy Leary. I'd actually heard the name, but I didn't really know who he was. I'd heard it on that song from In Search of the Lost Chord by Moody Blues. Timothy Leary's dead. But I didn't know who he was. No idea. I had actually heard his name again in the underground magazines, but never really kind of tapped into who actually he was. Anyway, I had a fantastic time in Glastonbury. It was a real turning point for me because apart from what I've been experiencing in suburbia, I've never really gone out there and gone to a festival or hung out with hippies different from where I was, younger school kids, really, ex-school kids. And we all spent the night on the tour. whoever was, there was maybe 200 people who got there, and I put my tent at the bottom of the Tor. The Tor is a hill and a mountain, this sacred place of Glastonbury, this ancient town with incredible history, where I have been living in the last few years. It's had a big part, taken a big part in my life, and in many parts of many people's lives involved with this culture. And we sat there smoking chillum, smoking joints, banging gongos, playing guitars, saw it through, and then crashed out in our tents. And in the morning, um, one of the guys that we knew was called Scratch, who had lived on Eal Pie Island. And he was now moving into one of these squats that had started in Twickenham on Grosvenor Road, which was quite near Twickenham station. And I got close to him, and my friend Steve Bird, who I'd met from Richmond, he was there. And I kind of like said, I kind of let Lucy and Mary do their thing. And we all went off into town. And I had my very first muesli. In those days, muesli was something quite esoteric, and it was a kind of initiation ritual. There was one hippie cafe in the whole of Glastonbury that was kind of somehow started from the festival before. Apart from that, the whole high street, there were little signs: no hippies, no hippies, no hippies, no hippies. They were done with hippies. Those two festivals, especially the last one, so many alternative people had come around and stayed, and they just didn't. It's a bastion of redneck conservative, and the actual kind of mindset of the local kind of Glastonbury people. And there was a field nearby. And Scratch found this out because we want to know, where is there anything going to happen? He said, look, there's no festival, but there's this place, and apparently there's this farmer who's kind of let hippies kind of do something in his garden and field. And we went, okay. So we had our food, went off. And when we arrived, there was about, 30 people or so more in this garden. And it was all like we just kind of stumbled in there, and people were like, hi, man. And there was this kind of weird thing in the tent in the middle, and people going through like a spiral and doing stuff. And anyway, and then people were leaving. And we put up our tents and kind of checked out the scene. And this is where, for the first time, I got an overview of the microcosm of this hippies and counterculture. And I realized there wasn't one type of hippie or one kind of coherent thing. There was all these different types, really. And what a big influence on me was this one tent, big tent, and there were these two brothers that had really long blonde hair and beards that looked like Jesus. And they used to sit for hours in lotus positions, meditate, and sit there and hold this really lovely space. And they were vegetarians and meditators, and they had got this beautiful incense from Pricknash Abbey on coals with frankincense, and they were burning it. And I just kept going into their tent, and I had my guitar, and they liked me, and the vibes in there were the best. And there was these other people like, come on guys, let's get it together, let's do this. They were kind of social activist types, and then you saw people kind of stumbling around on mandrax and smack, and then you just saw other hippies just playing the guitars, but I kept going to this tent, and I became influenced by the vegetarian meditators. And I thought, yeah, peace and love, vegetarianism. I didn't really know about meditation. I knew a little bit from Maharishi, but I thought I like that vibe. To me, this represent peace and love, the kind of hippie that I was interested to find out more about. And I just got that clue from that guy. Now, when I got back, I spent a week there having this experience, and dropped a couple of trips of acid with my friend Steve. They were quite profound as well, deep and big and powerful. And I ended up going to Bath, and then from Bath coming back to London. And during this process, I think, yes, it was this time, my mother had found out a place where I could go to do my O-levels. And this is interesting because we had some very close friends of our family who were close friends with a very famous family, or at least one member. And that was a partner of a comedy writing team called Galton and Simpson. And this was Ray Galton. And his two children, Sarah, his daughter, younger, and Andrew, older, same age as me, were suffering a very similar problem to me with their schools. I can't remember if it was Kingston Grammar or Tiffin, but it was in Kingston. And Andrew had a similar problem: long hair, smoking pot, everything. And they had found a way to go into this school that was quite a way away, but had different principles and was much less strict than our grammar schools, and that was Holland Park Comprehensive in Kensington. So through this connection, well, Ray Galton was very interesting and famous. He had written, Steptoe and Son. He'd written scripts for Frankie Howard and I can't remember the name. I'll remember it anyway. Anyway, it was really interesting. And anyway, so I went for an interview with the vice president, the vice headmaster of Holland Park Comprehensive, and he kind of liked me. And it was, I think they were quite glad that they were getting somebody from a grammar school, even though I was not brilliant, but that wasn't bad. And we had this amazing little talk, and I was quite idealistic at that time, and he was very cynical, and he asked me what I thought about life, and I just said that I thought I wanted to find the answer, and this kind of I was searching for things, and he just said there is no answer, there is no it's all kind of like everything is meaningless. Really, it was really depressing. It was a very strange little talk, and anyway. My mother was really happy. I was kind of happy that we'd found this place, a place where I could kind of carry on, at least, and I didn't have to wear school uniform, didn't have to have my hair cut. Okay, it was a little bit of a journey. I had to get a 267 to Hammersmith, change and get a 73 and go on to there. But, and that's what I did for that year. And during that time, I actually procured a copy of Politics of Ecstasy by Timothy Leary. And after reading that book, Play Power by Richard Neville, the overview of the hippie movement, this was the first kind of serious book I was reading. I actually had read The Hobbit. That was it. I wasn't really reading big books. And I got it, and I really didn't know what to expect because I didn't know much about Timothy Leary. And within a few pages, I was a little bit taken aback because the word God appeared somewhere quite close at the beginning, but then he kind of qualified it, and then kind of the word consciousness started to come into the story, and I went, okay, I can handle consciousness, let's hear what he has to say. And he goes on, the book was interesting, and I did enjoy it, and it opened up a kind of whole world about what mature this gentleman was and what he had gone through, and I've explained that in my story. But actually, the book Politics of Ecstasy wasn't the most important thing that happened to me. It was just a stepping stone, because in that book there was a chapter at the end on Hermann Hesse, who I'd never heard of, this German writer, and who he swore that his book Steppenwolf was kind of psychedelic, and this is also very, very controversial. But he was the one that kind of promoted Steppenwolf and kind of helped with promote. Hermann Hesse became this kind of must-read author, but for hippies at that time. A lot of it due to the promotion by Timothy Leary, and that's what happened to me. In fact, the next day at school, there was a girl, and who, we used to have this little place where we used to go and have fags, and it was in just next to the school. And this one girl had a bag, and I could see in her bag this little Hesse, half of the name. I said, "Is that a Hesse book you've got?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "I'm going to finish it today. It's fantastic." I said, "Do you want it?" I said, "Well, yeah, you can have it. I'll give it to you tomorrow." So she gave me Damien from Hermann Hesse, and it changed my life, basically. Hermann Hesse became my first guru. Suddenly this thing my cousin had been talking about, spiritual, it's suddenly I kind of like, right. And I mean, Hermann Hesse was a genius, and here I am, I'm a 15-year-old schoolboy from England, being taken by the hand into this kind of dimension that he's opening up by this incredible literature that he's writing, to try and express the kind of like the spiritual dimension. And he's a very, very interesting person in this East-West story, because in his family, his grandfather had lived in India and had been one of the early translators of Malayalam. And then his father, I think, had been brought up there. And in their house, they had all these images of Hindu gods and everything. Hermann Hesse's father was a bit more of a Christian redneck, but his grandfather was very kind of broad-minded culturally. But he had got influenced by this and read the Upanishads and all sorts of things and stories and things to do with Krishna. And he was one of these people that was bridging the world between the East and the West, kind of writing novels that were expressing kind of alternative spiritual dimensions. And and people who become fans of Herman Hesse, like I am to this day, they are fantastic. I highly recommend you read any of his classic books. Some are better or deeper and have more meaning than others, but I literally went through one to the other. Damien, then Siddhartha, and then the Glass Bead Game. And then we had a few in our school library, and then I got some from other libraries. And my parents were like, my goodness, what's going on? And they started to become even a bit disturbed about that, because spiritual was a little bit different from them, and they didn't know where I was going with that, because they didn't really know what kind of work I was doing. I didn't really seem to do much homework, but I was just absorbed in that time, just in reading. So books. I highly recommend books as transformative, and I'm making a big thing about it because they had this humongous effect on the way I was going to see reality and understand myself. And also this way that I've been dabbling in psychedelics up to now, I suddenly kind of had developed a bit more respect, and I kind of stopped dabbling in it so much. And I went on this big research to understand about psychedelics, and I started to go into a very deep space. And I discovered a little book recently that I didn't know was there. It was a book that was hanging around with Mary, Mick, and my other friends, and they'd written little things about me at that time, and I hadn't seen it. I didn't know that it existed, and it's and it's funny. I can see where I was going through at the time. I was starting to get into all these concepts. I went round to this squat had started in Twickenham. I got asked to leave and kind of left Hampton, and my friend Chris Jackson lasted a few months, and he left home and went to move into a room in the squat in Grosvenor Road. So I used to go there and hang out there. And I got right when the very few houses started. They were very nice. The people that are Seamus and Scratch. And the person who I had quite an influence was the only one really amongst that whole gang who was into this LSD, spirituality, yoga, was a guy called Bob, who had a beard. And so his nickname was Bob the Beard. And lovely guy. He was quite very instrumental in that little part of my journey. And one of the reasons he was instrumental was he taught me yoga. And he had the only person that had books. It was the first time I saw a picture of Indian yogis like Ramana Maharshi, that famous book of him. I saw autobiography of a yogi, the picture of Yogananda. But most important of all of that was this book that he was going to have called Be Here Now. So by Ramdas, who was Richard Alpert's, who with Timothy Leary had gone to India, come back, and it'd taken him a while, but in 71, this book had kind of come out, and it wasn't that long out. And I arrived in Bob the Beard's library, and because I came to him and I could see that he was into this stuff, and I was just getting into it. My other friends, no, Chris and Gordon, they weren't into it like I was into it. In fact, none of my brothers' friends, even of his age group, none of them were going as deep as I was. I couldn't believe that they were 4 years older. None of them had really read Timothy Leary or anything that he was into. None of them kind of like took the psychedelic experience or as seriously as I did. Maybe we were all different. People were having different experiences. Everyone was going through this, but I was kind of on this journey, and there wasn't that many. Mick Pitt, my friend, he was kind of very aware. He was my spiritual buddy, and then this Bob. Bob was the one that taught me how to do a few yoga asanas, because there came a time within this whole search, basically, of spiritual stuff where it's like, okay, I've got all this information. I've got to do something now, a practice that I'm getting. And that's what Be Here Now was all about. Be Here Now was all about the lessons that Ramdas had learned for after going to India and being through this whole journey for a few years, and millions of people were looking up to people like him for guidance, and he had brought out this fantastic book, which is kind of an overview of spirituality in general and lots of stuff from India, and it was very cool to read, very hip, very succinct, and it was there that I learned. I actually understood about karma. I've been learning that in the books, but this put it, explained it quite simply. Karma, ahimsa, non-violence, and bhakti. First time I'd heard about bhakti. He even gives reference to the Christian school, the interior prayer of the heart, and I heard about these and the Philokalia and the Pilgrim's Journey and all of that stuff. And I started. It was a very, very important book because what I did was I started to do yoga, I started to do pranayama. And there was this other wonderful group that appeared at that time called Quintessence. One of the main persons has kind of continued to be a very influential person in the whole psychedelic scene, and that was one of the members called Raja Ram. And he played flute, and he was one of the singer. The main singer was called Shiva. They all had these Indian names. And my brother had actually gone to the live concert where one of their main albums was recorded. It was called Quintessence, and you opened it up, and there was this fantastic picture, psychedelic picture that many hippies had on their walls, like an altar on the shelves. It was done by this lovely chap called Gopal, who would get very close with the Krishna movement. He would actually kind of end up, there's a portrait in Bhaktivedanta Manor that he did then at that time. He came and stayed there. It's a fantastic life-size painting of Prabhupada. And he also did an album, another cover for Quintessence called In Blissful Company, which had a picture of Krishna meditating in the Himalayas or in the mountains and sitting on a kind of lotus flower mat. And I used to kind of trip out on looking at all of that. And I thought, okay, that's how the lotus flower makes this mandala. And I just kind of did a sketch, and then I went home and I copied this kind of idea of this expanding lotus flower thing on my wall, just as a drawing. I had a big grandiose idea to possibly paint it, but I just did it. And I started to sit and do breathing exercises after my yoga and had this experience of looking in the middle. But actually, just before this, the reason this became attractive was I was at a friend's house in Twickenham, who I was introduced to, an older guy, and we were sitting around there, and he wasn't in the squats, but he lived nearby. And that's where I heard first time this incredible psychedelic album called Tonto's Expanding Headband. And we just listened to the Moody Blues album, and I said, "Oh, can I have a look at that?" And I looked at it, and that was inside of it was a black and white drawing of the Sri Yantra, and there was a little blurb about it. And while we just had a joint and they were talking, he put on this music, incredible, the Tonto's Expanding Headband, and I just got lost in meditating. I don't know what happened really. I was basically meditating without realizing I was meditating, and because basically I just got lost in this mandala, this yantra, Sri Yantra. I even have a copy on my wall today. It's very, very powerful image. And interlocking triangles with lotus flowers and a border around it. And at the end of this session, suddenly the music stopped, and they looked at me, and they kind of looked, and he realized that I'd just been off on something. And that was really my first real experience of kind of a type of meditation, and so that's what led me to this other meditation on my wall. And there were lots of clues that Ramdas had, like mantras, but I hadn't quite got there yet. And I'm going to stop at this moment and carry on with this story tomorrow and explain all these other little things that are going to happen that are going to kind of lead to the actual kind of big Krishna connection. So I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. And now I'm going to finish with a song, and I'm going to do the song Walk in the Park. I've done it before, and you can be walking or getting out of a stressful situation somewhere, and you go off into nature, and as you do it, you unwind and you get into a kind of reflective state of mind, and you maybe go into a prayerful state, and you kind of have a conversation with God, and God talks back to you, and that's the idea behind this song, really. And so it's called Walk in the Park, and here it comes. Walking in the park one day, must have been springtime. Never find time to pray, left alone to unwind. I feel my spirits rise, tingling in my spine. I find as I close my eyes, peace within my own mind. Oh Lord, and I thank you for this day. I know your love is the only way. You hold all the answers in your hand. Lord, won't you talk to me that I might understand? Jaja say, why deny my love? I've always been there for you, and always will be too. Guiding everyone along the journey home. You never walk alone. Deep in your heart you'll find me. Only the purest love can bind me. Deep in your heart you'll find me. Only the purest love can bind me. You need but surrender. Put your trust in me, and always remember your faith. Faith will set you free. Do 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 do. Oh Lord, and I thank you for this day. I know your love is the only way. You hold all the answers in your hand. Lord, won't you talk to me that I might understand? Deep in your heart you'll find me. Only the purest love can bind me. Deep in your heart you'll find me. Only the purest love can bind me. Deep in your heart you'll find me. Only the purest love can bind me. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for all those of you who've taken the time. I do go on a bit, don't I? But there's a lot of a story to tell, and I'm going to tomorrow definitely get to the point, and then take a day or two off to do all sorts of things. I'm planning to take this also I'm really enjoying doing this, and I've got lots more things to share. And I'm just trying to figure out ways with Darren, who's my tech guru and my dear friend, about how to increase the quality of where to take this kind of thing that we're doing at the moment. And hi, Anu, namaste. It's been an honor to be able to share this with everybody. I've always believed in love and peace since the 60s, and I still believe, and I still think that this is the only way that we're going to solve any of our collective and individual problems. And when it gets down to it, when you get to the point of leaving this world, it's the love that we've spread and shared and have experienced in our heart that's going to carry us forward into wherever we're going to go after that. Everything else is worthless. Hari Om. I love you all.